Really? Another one? Number one Ibble Dibble here.
It's really hard to look back on it now and go, what on earth happened?
This opening line is so sad to me because it makes it clear that Harry wasn't in on the plan. He is the victim of narcissistic abuse that has turned his life completely upside down, and he doesn't even know it yet. He doesn't understand why he isn't still a working royal. He has yet to identify that the fallout with his family was manipulated by his wife. For a while, I was thinking maybe Harry had been faking it for several years as a working royal. Maybe he secretly hated his family and was just going about his duties, but always wishing he could be someone else, be somewhere else. And Meghan just gave him permission to do it. Now I think Meghan hit him with her formula, the formula we talked about in the last video. Urgent emotional appeal plus question with false premise. She encouraged him to act in just the ways she wanted and predicted, but he takes full responsibility for them because he was the one who unquestioningly accepted her premises and acted on them.
And then everything changed.
This poor sod. Look at that duper's delight. The common expressions for this mechanism are getting sold a bill of goods, getting scammed, getting got. Meghan's a calm woman. Your family didn't flip on you, Hazza. The entirety of Britain did not flip on you. Your wife did. The first false premise they set up in this trailer is that all royal women live in terrible danger.
Pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution, this feeding frenzy.
I realized they're never going to protect you.
But Meghan especially so because she's not white.
It's about hatred. It's about race. It's a dirty game.
And not at the top of the hierarchy.
There's a hierarchy of the family. There's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agenda.
So let's break down the many incorrect assumptions they like us to make, and Harry unfortunately did make, in order to agree with this premise. First, that all royal women live in terrible danger. There's something to this. Queen Elizabeth survived 3 assassination attempts. First, someone tried to derail her train in Australia in 1970. Princess Anne famously survived an armed kidnapping attempt in 1974. This is when the modern effort at royal protection really began. Royals used to have 1 round-the-clock bodyguard each. At this time, it was increased to 2 round-the-clock bodyguards each. And they changed the types of pistol they carry. Anne's guards Walter's pistol jammed, so they upgraded to Glocks. Then in 1981, there were 2 separate attempts by teenagers with psychiatric problems. The first shot blank during Trooping the Colour.
Field Marshal His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. Hello, some little disturbance in the approach road.
And during a visit to New Zealand, another shot at her as she arrived for a meet and greet. And as a result, in 1983, Scotland Yard formed the Royal Protection Group, which has since evolved into the Royal and VIP Executive Committee. This is a squad of private protection officers, about 175 guys total, all of whom have a minimum of 10 to 15 years of experience in overseas and venue recon, advanced aggressive driving, unarmed combat, firearms, and emergency first aid. When accompanying a royal, they each carry a Glock, radio, and first aid kit on their person, but dress in plain clothes. Before a royal goes anywhere, they do several risk assessments in advance, week of, day of, and several sweeps. Senior royals are protected round the clock, junior royals only for appearances, and the number of officers varies depending on the situation. For security purposes, they never reveal the number or location of protection officers, obviously. But looking at videos, looking at pictures, it seems that the Queen, and now King, always have at least 4 surrounding their person, and I'd guess 2, 3, 4, 6 more planted at strategic points on their route, and also in the crowd to gauge the crowd's mood. Same with the Prince and Princess of Wales. When you look at someone like Princess Anne, it seems like she also gets the big guns for big events, but perhaps fewer guys surrounding her property 24/7. Maybe William and Kate get 4 guys in Kensington, 6 guys in Norfolk, whereas Anne probably gets 2 to 4 guys rotating shifts of 1 to 2. at home. When I look at videos of Harry and Meghan's early appearances, for example, their first ever royal appearance at Nottingham, I see they are getting the same level of security as senior royals. At least 4 or 5 guys around their person, inevitable others strategically positioned on the route and in the crowd, and 2 dummy cars, all for their security. Obviously, Meghan was protected commensurately with her status. This thing she keeps saying,
"They're never going to protect you,"
is not only a lie, but an insult. Stop pretending your father and grandmother didn't love you or care about your safety. Stop pretending the British people weren't literally financially supporting your security to the highest international standards. The next assumption they ask us to make is that even if the royal family and the British taxpayer met their duty of care by supplying this excellent security, no security would have been good enough because Meghan was uniquely targeted due to her mixed race heritage. 6 days ago, Neil Basu, the former counterterrorism head of the Metropolitan Police, claimed that Meghan received racially motivated, credible threats to her safety that were investigated and prosecuted.
You were in charge of royal protection. How would you characterize the threats that Meghan and Harry received?
Well, disgusting and very real. I've talked publicly for many years about the threat of extreme right-wing terrorism in this country. I've often been misquoted as taking my eye off the ball, as though I think that that was the biggest threat. I've never called it the biggest threat, but it was the fastest growing. And my wonderful friend and counterpart at MI5 will tell you exactly the same thing, that when I started in CT in 2015, counterterrorism, it was about 6% of our total workload. Certainly when I left 15, 16 months ago, it was over 20% of our workload.
But there were many serious, credible threats against Meghan, were there, emanating from the far right?
Absolutely. If you'd seen the stuff that was written and you were receiving it, the kind of rhetoric that's online, if you don't know what I know, you would feel under threat all of the time.
So you were convinced that there was a genuine threat to Meghan's life on more than one occasion, on several occasions?
Absolutely. We had teams investigating it. People have been prosecuted for those threats.
Since the interview, sugars have been saying, "See, told you so." And haters like myself, what should we call ourselves? Vinegars? Have been pointing out that having just retired, Neil may have been paid off handsomely by the Harkles to say this, or was possibly willing to do so gratis because he's sort of a windbag who built his reputation on being the first ethnic minority to hold various high leadership positions in the police force, and he's collected his flowers for it, receiving an honorary graduate degree from Staffordshire University, giving a keynote speech to the Society of Editors, etc. In his time, he always made sure that he was the face of his department dealing with the press. However, let's give him a bit of credit and listen carefully to what he says.
The kind of rhetoric that's online, if you don't know what I know, you would feel under threat all of the time.
He's telling us what we already know. Yes, of course, there were real threats, but Meghan's perception of them as particularly numerous and or dangerous stemmed from her obsession with reading about herself online. Let me ask you a rhetorical question, a la Meghan. Do you think the Princess of Wales sits at home Googling threats to Prince George's life? Or do you think she leaves it to the career professionals surrounding her? This leads us to the third assumption we're being asked to make, that media coverage engenders physical and mental danger. We all know this to be true. The only thing worse than embarrassing yourself is embarrassing yourself on the world stage. Of course, the rich and famous are targeted because their visibility makes them easier marks. Kim Kardashian's Paris robbery is a perfect example. But the unspoken corollary to this assumption, H&M tacitly asks us to agree with, is that it is not only unkind, but unfair and unacceptable. I disagree. Live by the sword, die by the sword. I believe this particularly in regards to royalty. Heads of state and heads of church must be very public figures in order to be sufficiently scrutinized. Sure, Harry never got to choose the family he was born into, but he also hasn't given up his spot in the line of succession, role as a counselor of state, or titles as a duke, earl, baron, etc. Has he? As for Meghan, she was never an artist. She was never an activist. She has been and always sought to be the kind of celebrity who benefited financially and socially from their notoriety. A celebrity, nothing more. But certainly, God forbid, nothing less. I'm not saying there shouldn't be checks, balances, protections. We have laws against harassment and assault. We have laws to protect privacy. But historically, those who demand to be first among equals face comeuppance. You two love ancient history. Why don't you read the Magna Carta? Call up your Latin tutor and ask him whatever happened to Julius Caesar after the Gallic Wars. This all leads us to the fourth assumption they hope for us to make, that the paparazzi directly caused Diana's death. And the fifth assumption, that Meghan is in an analogous situation to Diana.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself.
I don't disagree with Harry that her death was a tragedy. However, she would have been far better served by a breathalyzer and a seatbelt than a war on free speech. Insofar as Diana's death was caused, to whatever extent, by paparazzi, laws and norms have already changed. More impactfully, the business has changed. With the advent of social media, photogs no longer need chase celebrities. Most of them put more of themselves than we could ever wish to gawk at online. We'll never see gluts of photogs outside people's apartments or gyms like we did 25 years ago, because the celebrities themselves are more than happy to post their relationship, their baby, their diet, their bikini, their favorite bar, anything you'd really like to know. The value of photos of people like Harry and Meghan is simply a lot lower than it used to be. Harry and Meghan cannot credibly claim to be hounded. They simply aren't. I think this is a great example of the truth versus their truth. The Royal Rota does their job. Every wedding, birth, christening, tea party, horse race, and community center visit is in the papers and on social media. Royal security does their job. Nobody's jumping the walls or loitering in the park, getting photos of the royals. Ever since the telephoto lens law went into effect, the most we see of Kate is an iPhone snap of her in a supermarket parking lot every 5 years. I think this is a great example of the truth versus their truth, no matter how few people take pictures of them, even if they're the ones calling the paparazzi to take pictures of themselves. They feel hounded, or like to say they feel hounded to garner sympathy. The final and most ludicrous assumption they ask us to make is that they had to leave the royal family and the UK because Harry's own family was planting racist hit pieces in the press.
There's a hierarchy of the family. There's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's gender.
I'm sorry, but I just don't believe it. I think they're absolutely delusional and incredibly lucky that the rest of the royal family isn't as fond of suing for slander as Harry. Believe me, Meghan, if Kate wanted to ruin you, her mother and sister could easily cook up a pile of social situations to expose you and mock you. Of course they haven't, because they simply want nothing to do with you. And for a narcissist like Meghan, that's what really hurts. So place your bets. When are King Charles's people going to send that cease and desist letter? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.